Alright, it's 9 a second. Just trying to stick with it. Blender's kind of getting to me right now, so it is. It's the texture painting. I don't really know. Like I said, I don't really know where to go for the texture because it's just you can see there. It's just it's so bad, and it's just the PDSM looks so much better. Like there, like they need to like, change the data nails and stuff, but it's just never really did a texture paint before. I don't really know how to approach it. I know what's wrong. It's obviously the texture. But it's like, why is it so different where I go? So do I just continue on arts the texture guides? Maybe I'll get to something eventually. I mean, I'm learning a lot of good stuff, but I don't think it's gonna help me with this part. Or do I try and find
Welcome back to my
or do I try and find a, or should I finish say that? Or do I try and find a video where to do the texturing from start to finish? No, we started with no snow though, and if we've got his one of the Blue Archive character, and I wonder if it's got any texture in it. It it does seem to be. Yes, it does seem to be. So I'm gonna quickly watch this part and then go back to the Ryan Arch one because I wanna try and get the face done right because it's just going to annoy me if I don't do it the whole time. You know what I mean? Just sitting there looking like that looks really bad. The EV up coming down there is also a bit bad, but I could probably change that too. But just wanna go. So right, okay. So first we're gonna be Naruto's 3D style. I can't remember the name of the character. I know her, but it's yeah, this one. So I'm gonna just skip the texture. See if I can pick up anything from here. Um. So let's see. Down a wee bit. Full screen again. The other part that is the craziest. Like the hair is like very little detail compared to the way I've did the hair in my ones, but his just looks better. I think it's just because the way the character's done, or the way he does the shading later on, or maybe it's just I hate my own ones, but it's just it's the light pink. That's that. That's the eye. Why is he out of circle there? Oh, can you do that? An adjustable. Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to try and figure out how to do that. What's that? Oh, that is really cool. Doing the path, basically a circle even, and then doing the flying around us. So have to look that up. Oh, and that's yeah, that's the type of texture I want to learn. He still hasn't mirrored at this point. He hasn't applied the mirror. Being able to tell that actually makes me feel good. I can fucking tell. But hold on, I'm just gonna go here and oh no, it's hold on, I'll just put that down because Tim, what the fuck? Just go here and skin. Remove the skin texture. Why does it do that and I fill it in now? Cause yeah, to me that just looks. Is it the lighting? Have I hit the lights or something? Where's this thing? Or is it the is it this? And when you accidentally click a fill and then you do that and then it lags like crazy. Okay. No. God damn it. I want to get more RAM, but you know how stuff is going lately. Hide that for now. I don't know why I haven't really did anything, but it already looks better. So what did he do? Just this. I mean, this the shades obviously down here is gonna be. I was come down here and say till. Alright, material preview. You see it down there yet? Okay. Yeah, that's too dark. So if I turn that on. Why the? And like he's on this preview, and he can see it that well. Have I just got something wrong with my lights or what or what? What's going on? Like that. Why is that over here then? I did. So why does that part of bird get interesting? I don't know. It's just. Oh, hold on. Hold on. That doesn't seem right. Standard viewport samples blender. What do they normally run? Like, why is that 16? Shouldn't that be like fucking 124 or something like that? No, 128. And yeah, that should be something like that. Nah, I'm just saying the nose. Like the nose is too freaking big. Uh, Yeah, I don't think that should be. Why is that so fucking big? These they just be with these now. I'll deal with the hand of dealt. Those is definitely too big now to see it too. Oh my god, so much stuff wrong with the model. I just want to finish it though. Now. I just want to get texture, learn the texture. Um, yeah, I definitely feel like there's something wrong with my lighting settings, maybe. Because he's got it in 3-point shading mode. And it's like really bright. Mine's really dark. No, okay, I'll just go back to Ran Arch 1. Or what's this one?
3D anime character series. Previously I showed the process of modelling the face and the eyes, and in this video I'll explain my approach to setting up the UV map so we can apply textures. So without any more delays, let's get stuck in. You will notice I have a few red lines set up on the face so far. These are referred to as seams. These will allow us to unwrap the mesh to create a texture map. To make a seam, enter edit mode and press 2 for edge mode, then select the edges you wish to mark as seams. Right click and select mark seam, and to remove a seam, select clear instead. If you cannot see these edges, press the view
This is okay. This is a part here. Let's skip
since this is only half the face, I want to place it roughly at the halfway point so I can flip it over later once we've applied the mirror modifier. Once in place, select the edge, make sure the edges are all aligned and press N, and then set the X value to 0.5. At times you might want to expand the UV island without having to unwrap it again, causing you to start from scratch. One method is to unwrap the new area and connect it manually by using vertex snapping. You can access this here, and you can either press the magnet or hold control while grabbing your selection. This is how I did it here, however there is a much easier method. Select your island and press P. This will pin the selected verts in place. Now whenever you unwrap this part of the mesh, these UVs will remain the same. So it is a case of pinning your islands in place, then selecting it alongside the new faces, and then hitting unwrap to move them into place. Note that this only works with basic unwrap, as the project from view will override everything selected. I'm going to fast forward a little here to explain a process known as vectorizing. Since I'll be using a cell shader, a lot of the sections will be blocked out with a single colour and not really have a lot of texture to them. This means the spaces in which our islands occupy can vary a lot based on their needs, whereas with traditional modelling, often we would want to allocate UV space evenly. Since the face and eyes will require the most texture detail, they'll take up most of the space on the sheet, while areas like the neck and scalp can take up a lot less space. Using the knife tool, I cut into the mesh to mark a hairline. These lines require the crease value to be set to 1 to ensure they remain consistent with a subsurface modifier on. Doing something like this results in very ugly typology, so I try to keep it as neat as I can. Doing this with a diffuse shader would result in some very ugly shading, but because I will be reworking the normals for our cell shading, a lot of this artifacting won't be visible. Now I mentioned vectorizing. The scout will be placed in a section of the map that consists of a block color. Here is a better example of the technique. This black line and shading have been cut into the mesh itself, with their UVs occupying a blocked out section. You could just draw these details straight onto your texture, however, you will get pixelated edges where this method will allow you to work with low resolution textures while retaining ultra sharp detail. I will talk more about other vector techniques at the end, but for now, let's export our UV layout so we can create our texture. Select everything with A, and in the UV drop-down, select Export UV Layout. This will open a save menu. On the right, there are a few options you can adjust. Typically, I leave the format as PNG. As for now, let's explore. You will get the map that consists of a block color.
Yeah, it's basically saying he makes like certain areas for the mesh and then separates it there. Instead of drawing it on from the paint, like an airbrush, so you don't get the pixelated parts.
Here is a better example of the technique. This black line and shading have been cut into the mesh
I'll just
itself,
show you here.
with their UVs occupying a blocked out section. You could just draw these details straight onto your texture, however, you will get pixelated edges where this method will allow you to work with low resolution textures while retaining ultra sharp detail.
And what he means by that ultra sharp though, he doesn't really explain very well to be honest, but it says because the entire place is like blocked out as you can see there from the UV map, your shading, whatever it is, will be strictly following the UV mesh. So as soon as that edge line cuts off, that texture cuts off. That like there's no pixelates from like the airbrush, the fall off, if you want to put it that way. And it says that that's how you would do, like if it's low poly, that's fine, because you know again as soon as the poly edge flow ends, the color just changes regardless of what resolution the texture paint's done at. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
I will talk more about other vector techniques at the end, but for now, let's export our UV layout so we can create our texture. Select everything with A, and in the UV drop-down, select Export UV Layout. This will open a save menu. On the right, there are a few options you can adjust. Typically, I leave the format as PNG. As for the size, 1024 is fine, but generally I like to double it to 2048. You can also set it to 496 for 4K textures as well. It all depends on your needs. Working at high resolution gives you more options to downscale later on, but as your texture gets more complicated, it'll probably take longer to export, so keep that in mind. To create your textures, you could use a program like Substance Painter, but such programs have a monthly cost. Luckily, creating textures for this kind of model is relatively simplistic, so I'll be using a free Photoshop alternative called GIMP. But just use the program you're most comfortable with. I should mention that Blender does have some painting tools included, allowing you to directly paint on your mesh. However, it is very basic and lacks many of the features of other bitmap programs, so I only recommend it for simple processes. Open your UV image in your desired program, duplicate it to a new layer and flip it to give you the full layout. Then it's just a case of blocking out the colours you want for each area. I do my colours on individual layers so I can adjust their tones a lot easier later on. I won't go into too much detail here, as a lot of the techniques I covered in my reference video are repeated here. Once you've made the adjustments to the texture, hide the UV layer and export it. For games, the DDS format is common, but often you'll need a plugin for it, so I suggest exporting as PNG for now. I also suggest giving the file name a suffix, such as base colour, so you know what it's for. To get the texture to appear on our model, we need to assign a material first. You can do this by clicking here, hitting the plus, and then new. I won't be talking about shaders here, as I think it warrants its own video. So just set this to principled BSDF, then press the yellow button by base color and select image texture. Then it's just a case of assigning your texture. To make it appear in the...
Why is that so different from the other ones I normally do? Hold on, I'm just clicking on away for nice. Just to make sure my everything looks surface, so. I don't see no progress. Surface head texture. Uh, what's it? Okay, well that was. Is it okay? Maybe it's the color space I'm using. Okay. That's way too bright. I don't want. So my logic and then go RGB brings it back to that. So that's okay. Now I've got a new question. So what is it? Color space. What color? For skin texture blender. This okay. So here I don't want the super realistic one. The fucking hell is crazy. Crystalic burst nectar. What the hell is that? Hmm. Oh, that's crazy. I like that. Random walk. What do you mean random walk? Oh, that's principal BDSC surface. Yeah, so that's not actually an image detector. Okay, so that's not actually what I'm looking for. Cluster surfaces. This is old. It's not a mass resolution. Eternally and basically everything should be non-color unless it's obviously color mode, in which it should be almost always sRGB. The only exception being Inferno maps, which are set to linear. Hmm. EXRs. Okay. So I was doing this sensor. sRGB texture seems dark. Better, I guess. So I'll do that. Oh, there's another one for ranking. How to combination issues. Okay, that's probably very nice. Okay. Hmm. We'll try. We'll go
In
back
this
this way.
video, I'll be going over 12 common shading and texturing issues which can happen in Blender. and I'll have timestamps in the video description if you just want to jump to each part. So hopefully you can use this video as a troubleshooting video to go through if you're having some. And I can unwrap angle based, and you can see that it looks good on the top and it looks good on the bottom, because you can see the top and the bottom were opened up, but right here you can see that it's really stretched and looks really weird, and that's because we need to actually cut this out because it is a circle, so we need to cut it out so we can open up flat. Now generally speaking, you want to add seams where it's going to be less visible. So here's the front of the mesh, so if I just go here to the back of the mesh, I can select this right here, and then I can hit U, and then I can click on mark seam, so this entire bit right here along here can lay out flat. So if I select everything, I can hit U, unwrap angle based, and then you can see that looks nice and flat. And then of course you can scale the UVs and move them around. So there is a bit of a seam here where the texture ends, but right here on the front of the mesh, it looks a lot better. And the third common texturing issue is that you may not be using sRGB or non-color correctly. So you can see I just have this metal material, so I have the base color, the metallic, the roughness, and the normal maps, but it looks way too shiny. It kind of looks like a mirror, and that is because any color which isn't contributing to the base color needs to be set to a non-color. So this roughness map here, the sRGB needs to be set to non-color. If I control shift selected to preview it, you can see how dark it is, but if I change the sRGB to non-color, you can see it's lighter, and so if the values are lighter, then the material is going to look more rough. So if I preview the principled shader, you can see now it looks a lot more.
Hold on, was that my mistake the whole time? Because he's got on. Oh my god! Don't tell me I was. How do you? Damn it! I have to follow. Go in a car, bitch. So it looks like that. If I put this in. Ah, you sons of bitches. So that was probably the mistake the whole time. Okay, so that's something so simple.
More rough metal. So here's sRGB. It's like a mirror, and here is a non-color. And that is true for any of the textures which aren't contributing to the base color. So the metallic here, if this was set to the sRGB, it doesn't actually really affect things too much, but you should set this to non-color. Also right here on the normal, if this is set to sRGB, it's gonna definitely mess things up. That looks really weird. And then also the base color, this needs to be left at sRGB. If this is set to non-color, you can't really notice it much in this example, but it will mess up the colors. So I'm going to change this back to sRGB. Now you can see that the yellow dot here is the base color, but then...
So yeah, okay. So what was happening there is I was putting the texture straight in with no... without the PDSC principle on there, in between. It wasn't optimizing the image too much to program anymore. It was just like slapping it on with no change whatsoever, no lighting, no roughness, no. You say there's no IR in there, no alpha, none of that. So that's why it was like so screwed up. Finally got somewhere.
The gray dots
and it was just I don't know why I noticed the Rand's
data or displacement data is purple. If I just drag these out just to open these up here, you can see there's a bunch more values like the diffuse, the specular, and different things like that. But you can see some of these have a yellow dot. And so the yellow dot is color data. For example, a tint, if you wanted a tint for the transmission, or for example, an emission, if you were having like a glowing material and you actually had a base color for that.
Again, forgot. But, I was actually shooting this time, wasn't too bad. Yeah, I was the warping one. Because he didn't have the line. You couldn't actually fold it.
And you can see that looks nice and flat. And then of course you can scale the UVs and move them around. So there is a bit of a seam here where the texture ends, but right here on the front of the mesh, it looks a lot better. And the third common texturing issue is that you may not be using sRGB or non-color correctly. So you can see I just have this metal material, so I have the base color, the metallic, the roughness, and the normal maps, but it looks way too shiny. It kind of looks like a mirror, and that is because any color which isn't contributing to the base color needs to be set to a non-color. So this roughness map here, the sRGB needs to be set to non-color. If I control shift selected to preview it, you can see how dark it is, but if I change the sRGB to non-color...
sorry for interrupting the target. I promise I will remember to put that back on again. It's just, the boots just got me So yeah, there's the principle there. Um. Hmm. This is the color, the coffee from the thing. Put it into that. So I've got a bad bad feeling. I've kind of screwed this up quite a bit now that I'm thinking about it. Like I'm thinking this should be like darn here. All the McShading should be done because this McShading is being done before this, which means none of the lighting and stuff will be taking effect. Uh, hmm. Is that? Hold on, let me just let me have a just slap us in there. So that doesn't work actually. Okay. I'll have to come back to that one. I have to come back to that one. Therapeutic. Okay. Let's just base color one. Okay. Still, it's all just be stuff. Some texture. Where's the hat? Don't I hide? Where's the hat? Okay, so the hat has it too. Okay, the hat was nice. Okay, that's probably why I was able to even do it in the first place.
You can see it's lighter, and so if the values are
And
lighter,
where is
then
my
the
OBS
material is going to look
server?
more rough. So if I preview the principal shader, you can see now it looks a lot more like the correct texture, and it's a more rough metal. So here's sRGB, it's like a mirror, and here is a non-color. And that is true for any of the textures which aren't contributing to the base color. So the metallic here, if this was set to the sRGB, it doesn't actually really affect things too much, but you should set this to non-color. Also right here on the normal, this is set to sRGB. It's gonna definitely mess things up. That looks really weird. And then also the base color, this needs to be left at sRGB. If this is set to non-color, you can't really notice it much in this example, but it will mess up the colors. So I'm gonna change this back to sRGB. Now you can see that the yellow dot here is the base color, but then the gray dots are the other values, and then the normal data or displacement data is purple. If I just drag these out just to open these up here, you can see there's a bunch more values like the diffuse, the specular, and different things like that. But you can see some of these have a yellow dot. And so the yellow dot is color data. For example, a tint, if you wanted a tint for the transmission, or for example, an emission, if you were having like a glowing material and you actually had a base color for that, you would want to set this texture map to sRGB.
Pause again, pause again, pause again. I'm having epiphanies right now. Okay, I'm having epiphanies right now. So the way he's did it there, the color probably won't need to be done by the normal was in here. I think we really should be doing a mix up here and mix. I guess it's the base color, and this is also color that I want to be mixed with it. So should I? Did a UV map? So shift D up here. Okay, okay, with that. So let's get the factor in there, which I want to do. Instead, can I? Can I move this here? Oh no, 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 no! It's a mixed color. Color mix. Is that it? Hold on. What the hell happened there? No, not color. God damn it! Control S. Why is Control S? Color mix. What's this? If I do that in there, so to take us across or shoot across again, and then put it into this one. No, fuck it, do it again. So up to here, and I bring it down. Okay, vector, and then put this color into this one. Hmm. Figure it again. That's very light. Then you want the color go up here, and then you want something here. So I cut this off now. Put this in. I think it's, yeah, I think I'm just getting the same result. Yeah, I think it is just giving the same result because it's green. The resolution in the green. I'm pretty sure that is color mixing going on there. Yeah, the green. Okay, so yeah, you could do it like this, but this is probably easier to do. Okay, yeah, I think it's all pretty much the same there. Good to check.
So any of the values which are contributing to the color, so these yellow dots here, those are contributing to the color, so those should be set to sRGB. The other ones need to be set to non-color. Alright, the fourth issue is if you are using a procedural material, but the texture is really stretched. So you can see here, if I change this to like generated coordinates, it looks stretched, and that's what's on default. You could also use the UVs if you want to like UV unwrap the object, but usually for procedural materials, it's best to use the object coordinates. But you can see this is still stretched. And that is because I scaled this up on the z-axis because I wanted to make the cylinder longer, but I didn't apply the scale. So you can see the noise texture looks stretched. So if I just hit Control A and apply the object scale, now you can see the noise texture doesn't look stretched on the object. So if there's some weird stretching, it might have to do with the generated coordinates or the UV coordinates or other coordinates. But if you're using the object coordinates and something still just doesn't look right, make sure you apply the object scale. And another great reason why you might want to apply the object scale is if I duplicate the cylinder and then I scale the cylinder way up, you can see this noise texture is really small, but then this noise texture is really big. And you can see this one actually looks a bit less strong because I've changed that distance value. Now, for some cases, you might want to do this. You might want to have the noise texture be smaller, but if you want the texture to look exactly the same, I can hit Control A and apply the scale. And now you can see the actual size of the noise looks the same on both objects because the scale is applied. Alright, and the fifth issue is that you may not be using the right texture coordinate. So on default, the default one is generated, but you can see if I change it to generated, it kind of looks okay on this object, that kind of looks fine, but you can see right over here on this object, it looks really stretched. And so that is because this cylinder is scaled up. However, you might think that I just need to apply the scale, like in our other example. If I hit Control A and apply the scale, you can see it doesn't actually fix it. And so that is because the generated coordinates doesn't work the same as the object coordinates. Now the generated coordinates are based on the object's bounding box, which is basically like a box which is covering the entire shape of the object, but because this is really long, we scale it way up, the cube here, the bounding box, which is basically like a box around the object, is really stretched. Whereas this object is very circular, so the box is going to be the correct shape, but if I were to like scale this on any axis, it would become stretched. Whereas if I change this to object coordinates, it's going to be even all around the object. And I do need to press Control A now and apply the scale because I scaled up those objects. But you can see in edit mode, even if I make this really long, it's not going to affect the stretching of the object coordinates. And of course, you can also use the UV coordinates if you want to UV unwrap your object. But for procedural materials like this noise texture, I usually always use object coordinates. So UV coordinates is generally best for image textures. Object coordinates is generally best for procedural materials. Now the sixth texturing or shading issue is that you may be mixing up a bump map and a normal map. Now a bump map and a normal map both are used to give bump data or normal data to the object. But you can see here is a normal map, so it has like kind of the blue and the pink. And then here is a bump map, and a bump map is just white and black. So first let's set up a normal map. So when you add in the normal map, you want to set it to non-color because it's not going to be contributing to the base color. And then what you want to do is search for the normal map, and the color goes into the color. That's going to convert it to normal data, so you can see the difference. And then the normal can go to the normal, the shader. So if I just preview the shader now, you can see it looks like a bumpy rock material. And then I can also like change the strength. Now with a bump map is different. So if I just put the color into the color here and set this to non-color, you can see it really doesn't look right. It's just white and black, and that's really weird. So instead, to convert a bump map into normal data, instead of using a normal map, I need to search for the bump node. So drop it here, and so I can take the color and I can put that into the height value, and then the normal can go into the normal. So if I just preview the bump right here, you can see it's just white and black. So if it's more white, that's going to tell it to pop out of the mesh. If it's black, that's going to push down into the mesh. So if I put that into the bump node, now you can see it kind of looks similar to the normal map where it's all kind of like pink and everything. If I plug this in here, it's like pink and purple and blue. Whereas if I use the bump node, it's also going to turn the bump map into kind of pink and purple and blue. And so those different colors are going to tell it what direction the little bits of faces are pointing. So it's going to add the fake bump. And then I can also change the distance here to make it less strong. So maybe just like a 0.1 or even like a 0.01. That looks a lot better because before it was kind of blown out, and you can see there's like the yellow kind of colors and the green kind of colors. So if I turn the distance way down, now it looks a lot more smooth and that looks a lot better. So I'll just preview the principled shader, and now you can see it looks like we have that bump there for this wood texture. And then I can also drag the strength. So that's the difference between the normal map and also the bump map. And the seventh issue is that you may not be setting up your displacements correctly. So I have this noise texture here, and what I'm going to do is put the noise texture into the displacement to actually make it pop out of the mesh. So you can see it appears as though it's kind of working. You can see it does look bumpy, but there's a few issues. For one thing, you can see it actually isn't affecting the shape of the mesh. And for another thing, there's this really weird line right here. So that is because we need to convert the factor data or the black and white data into displacement data, just like we use the normal map or the bump map to convert it to normal data. So I need to search for the displacement node, drop it here, and then we need to put the factor into the height value. And now that looks a lot better. And then I can also change the scale down to make it less strong. However, even though it looks like it's bumpy, it's not actually popping the geometry out of the mesh. And that's because you need to go to the material panel, and you need to go down here to the settings and the surface. And right here under surface, you can use bump only, which is just going to add like the normal data, kind of like the normal map, or you can use displacement only. So that's going to pop out the mesh, but it won't really look that detailed because it's not using any bump. Or you can use both, which is what I usually like to use, which is displacement and bump. So this way it kind of has all those details on the surface, but then it's also bumpy. And then of course you can change the strength. You can make it bigger or smaller to kind of pop that out. And you can also change the mid-level. So if it's like way too far out or way too far in, you can change the mid-level. Usually you can just leave the mid-level how it is. You can see that looks pretty good. The mid-level is about in the center of the mesh, but you can make it smaller or bigger. For example, if I were to search for like the brightness and contrast node. Brightness and contrast, drop this here. Let's just say that your texture was like really bright. So if your texture is really bright, or maybe it's really dark, then you could change that mid-level to correct it and just drag this down there. Or you could also change the brightness of the texture. And the 8th common texturing or shading issue is if you try to export your object to, for example, another 3D software or a game engine, or you try to upload it to something like Sketchfab or Fab to preview in the 3D viewer. Well, the problem with exporting this and adding it into another 3D software or like uploading to Sketchfab is that all of these materials here are the procedural shader nodes. So some of these do have image textures, but the image textures are mixed together. So there's like the roughness map, but then I'm using a color ramp to kind of adjust the color here of the Spitfire model. I also have like this logo here, but then I'm using like some different settings to put the logo on here. I'm using like some different UV maps. Then I'm mixing that together with this mix, so it looks a bit
You wanna
gray.
peek
And then I'm mixing that together with this mix color set to darken to add like some more textures. So you can see I like also texture painted like some little rivets here in the metal. And then I also have like the bump map. So I have a bunch of different procedural shader nodes, but
Beacon,
all of
so
these
it's all in the
nodes
one
here, they
texture.
don't work in other 3D software because these were just created for Blender. So if you try to upload this to a game engine or another 3D software, the software isn't going to know what to do because these shader nodes simply aren't built into the software. So to fix this, you'll have to texture bake your materials to texture maps. So you'll need to bake the entire material to just one single color map, a metallic map, a roughness map, and a normal map, or an emission map, whatever you need to do. For this material, I just have a base color, a roughness, and a normal. So in order to texture bake your models, you can check out my texture baking Blender tutorial playlist. And in that playlist, I have a lot of texture baking tutorials, like texture baking for beginners, also a video on how to texture bake procedural materials, as well as some texture baking add-ons like AutoBake, Oven, and Quick Baker, which are some great Blender add-ons for speeding up the texture baking process. And I also have a few other miscellaneous baking add-ons like baking textures from one UV map to another, how to bake normal decal maps, and baking high poly details to a low poly map. So now here in Fab, I uploaded this Supermarine Spitfire model that I created, and here is the 3D viewer. So I wanted to upload all the textures so that the customers could view them in the 3D viewer. So now I can actually preview the model in the 3D viewer. So if customers want to check it out before they purchase, they can check out the model in the 3D viewer, and all the textures are uploaded because I bake these to texture maps. And the 9th common issue is if you're using the wrong type of normal map. So often when you download textures online, when you download a normal map texture, they will often come with a GL version and a DX version. Now if I just preview the GL and the DX, you can see that they're basically inverted from each other. So you can see where this is blue right here, it's now pink over here, and so basically these two textures are the same texture, but they're just inverted from each other. Now why many textures online come with a GL and a DX is because different types of 3D software use different versions, either the GL or DX. And there's an article on Polygon.com, which is Blender Guru's texture website, where it kind of explains this, and you can also see OpenGL is used for cycles, and it's used for a bunch of different render engines here, but then DirectX is used for these other render engines like Unreal Engine and Unity. So for Blender, if you're using cycles or Eevee in Blender, you should always use OpenGL, but if you're using like Unreal Engine or Unity, then you'd want to use the DirectX. So this is the correct one in Blender, the GL. So it looks like, you know, the rock's popping out here and it's kind of caving in here. But if I put the color into the color of this one, you can see it's inverted. So now the rock texture just doesn't look right. The crevice here looks like it's popping out and that just looks weird. It doesn't look like a rock. But then this part here, which is more smooth, it looks like it's caving back in. So you can see that Blender definitely needs OpenGL because the DirectX is just inverted. So that is wrong. Now I don't know how technically accurate this is, but if for some reason you only have a DX and it looks wrong, you can just plug this into the color and then just turn the strength to -1, and that's going to flip it because it's inverted, so it's -1 instead of 1, and now you can see the rock texture looks pretty much the same. And the 10th common issue is if you're using displacements but you're not using enough geometry. So I have a cube here and I have this noise texture, and so I'm displacing this, but the problem is that it doesn't have enough detail to actually displace. So you can actually see right here it is displacing the mesh because like there's this vertex here and it's kind of extruding out, but there just isn't enough vertices. So if I just select everything, I can hit Control E, and then I can just click on subdivide, and I can just continue to subdivide it again and again, and you can see the more I subdivide it, the more detail it has. When you're using displacements, it actually uses the geometry of the mesh, and it moves it up and down to actually displace the mesh. Now if I just hit Control Z to undo this, another thing you can do instead is you can add the subdivision surface modifier instead if you don't want to actually affect the geometry.
Yeah.
So if I just add the subdivision surface modifier, now you can see when I add the subdivision surface modifier, it smooths it out. So if you don't like that, you can change the Catmull Clark to simple. So now it's going to actually subdivide it, but it's not going to change the shape. So now I can just turn up the subsurface levels.
I
Maybe I'll
didn't
turn
need
them
to-
all the way up to
that's-
like a 6. And now you can see it has lots of geometry.
Didn't even
So
know
it's
that was a
actually
thing. So
displacing
if
the
I want to
mesh
keep the
into
same
detail.
shape,
And
instead
the
of
11th
using the
common
edge creases, I
texturing
could just
issue
change
is
out.
if you have multiple materials in multiple material slots, but you didn't assign them correctly. So let's say that you have some part of your object and you created a new material, but then you forgot to assign it, or maybe you assigned it to the wrong area, then you might be confused and things might not be working correctly. So this is from my Sci-Fi Combat Robot tutorial series, and you can see like right here, if I click on this, I actually have a separate material for the red front plate vent. But then if I
This
like,
might be
click
something
right
I
up
was doing.
here, you can see this is just the red front plate. But then if I like click over here, this is just the red.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. Because I separated the head from the body. I want the head just to be its own like UV map thing, but it's all the one object. So how do I split that up? I just assign it, but then the body seems to be overlapping a wee bit. I don't know. We'll have to. I'll have to. This will probably explain it.
Metal. So why I duplicated these materials is so that I could add the different image textures. Like if I click right here, you can see this one says red front plate. And so I added a different material for adding like that decal, and another material for adding this decal, but then I just have a red color. So if you have a lot of materials and you're really confused with which material is on which part of the object, you can deselect everything. And then what you can do is just select one part. So let's just select the gray metal in the material slot, and then you can click on the select button. And you can see it's going to show you or select everything which has that
Oh,
material.
okay.
And let's say that I wanted to make this a different material. So I could, for example, click on the red metal, and we have all those parts selected.
You
And
said
then I can
assign.
just click on the assign button. So now it's going to assign that material to that part of the object. I'll just hit Control Z to undo that. Now, if you want to select a certain piece of an object which is within the same object, then you can deselect everything, and you can hit the L key with your mouse hovered over that piece. And you can see it's going to select that entire piece. So let's say that I want all this to just be the red metal, but I don't really want any of the decals. So I can click on the red metal and click on the assign button. Now let's say I wanted to deselect everything except just the red here. So if I just select everything, I can click on the red metal, and then I can click on deselect. And you can see it's just going to deselect those red metal pieces. You can see there is another red piece, but that is this one here. So the red front plate vent. So I can deselect that as well. I can also click on the red front plate and deselect that as well. Now it looks like all the red.
Oh,
bits are
so yeah, I did
deselected.
that
if
right.
you
So I
enable
just
the assign button.
yeah, just make the UV maps and then you assign it, and I'll. Okay, yes, okay, beautiful, beautiful,
The
beautiful. I
select
got it right.
button and the deselect button are very useful for just managing all the different materials in that object. And then also, if you've added like a lot of extra materials, like let me just click on the plus here, and I'm just going to add like some other materials. Let's add this one here. I'll click on the plus here to add a new material, and let's add like a few other ones. So now I have a few different materials that I'm not actually using. So if you have a lot of materials, maybe you're working on a really big project, you might get confused with all the different materials. And of course, renaming the materials can really help, but you might actually have some materials which are unassigned to a face on the mesh. So to fix this, you can click on the drop down, and you can click on remove unused slots. And that's going to remove any of those extra materials that you had, so it's only going to keep the materials that the mesh is
Oh, so I
actually
need to
using.
send assigned to
So
the
that can be
current
really
object.
useful
I'll
as well
remember.
for managing your material. And the
Okay.
12th common texturing or shading issue is that you might be confused with the different UV maps that you're using. So on this Sci-Fi Combat Robot, I have a few different textures. I have like this decal here, and then I also have like this electrical icon here. So you can see here's the electrical icon. There it is on the material if I preview it. But then also right down here, I have this bevel decal. Now what I wanted to do is I wanted to add multiple UV maps so that I could add a UV map for this one and move it to a different location, and that wouldn't affect the other texture. So to do this, you can go to the add menu and search for the UV map node, and you can select a UV map within the object, and you can plug the UV up to whatever image texture that you're using. So you can do that for both of these textures, so the decal here and then also the normal map decal. And then to create multiple UV maps, you can click right down here on the object data properties, and you can click on the plus here to create multiple UV maps. Now, what might be very confusing is that there is this little camera icon, and if I click on the camera icon,
That's
that's going to
render.
use a different UV map. So if, for example, I delete this UV map
Oh,
node
not render. That's the
and
active
delete this one here,
view
you
thing,
can
isn't
see
it?
it looks disappeared now, and that's actually because the decal is right over here. If I click on the camera icon, it's actually going to preview the different UV map. So if the camera icon is selected on a certain UV map, that is going to become the default UV map. So because I haven't actually assigned a UV map, you can see if I add the UV map node and I assign, let's say, UV map 1 and plug that up, it's going to force it to use UV map 1 because we have chosen that in the vector. If, however, I don't have a UV map, you can see there's nothing assigned to the vector. So it's going to use whatever one is the default. And so whatever the camera icon is selected on, that's which one it's going to use. So if I click between these, you can see it's actually moving around the decal because both of these UV maps are different. So make sure that you are previewing the correct UV map and make sure you have each UV
Yeah,
map
because he's got
plugged into
the
correct
a
vector.
different UV map assigned for each part. So it's moved it around. Obviously, damage move it around.
So I'm just going to give you an example of how I would set this up. So I want to have two different UV maps for these different decals. So I can search for the UV map node, and I'll drop this here. And on the drop down, I can choose the first UV map, and we could even rename this to UV map electrical. So now if I click here, I can add UV map electrical, and I can put this UV into the vector. But now I want to create a separate UV map for just the normal map decal. So I can click on the plus here to add a new UV map, and this one I can add UV map decal. So I'm going to call it UV map decal. So now right down here on the decal, I can search for another UV map, and I can click on the drop down and add the UV map decal, and the UV can go into the vector. So now we have a different UV map. Now because we just clicked on the plus here to create a new UV map, the UV map is the same on default. So now I can click here to go to the UV editing workspace, and I'll go into edit mode. And I'm just going to select everything, and then I can hit G to grab and move this around, but you can see something is wrong. The electrical decal is moving around, but the normal map decal isn't moving around. That's because we aren't previewing the correct UV map. So if you scroll right over here with your mouse up here on the top bar, you can choose the correct UV map that you want to preview and edit. So there is the UV map electrical, and there is the UV map decal. And these are the same UV maps that we have right over here on the object if you go over here to the object data properties and open up the UV maps. So in this case, I don't want to move around the electrical UV map because that's going to move this one around. I want to use the decal UV map. So now I can drag this around here and I can scale it down and just fit it to the right spot. And there we go. So it's right there. So if I go back here to the shading workspace, you can see it's placed in the correct spot. So if you are confused with the UV maps that you're using, make sure you're using the UV map node and plug the correct one up. Make sure that you add the correct UV maps on the object, and you can also rename them. Make sure the default one is previewed, so whichever one you want to be the default.
I kind of get it. It's just confused me a wee bit now. So where is it? He's in. Only got the one UV map so far. Give me a quick second here. So I'm hate this. Just head texture, body, texture. So as to go here now, do this. Go to edit mode. Link, 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 link. Head texture is assigned. Okay. And then do body texture. Body texture. Times the why not? Just fuck it, let's go. Um, it was okay. Okay, okay, tokely. Then you go into UV editing. And you go to bar texture. Okay, tokely. And then we're gonna go text paint, and then you shift X, and you grab that one, and then you go with this one, you go fill. Yeah, that obviously gonna need some work, like, but okay. Go to head text again. Go here. Yes, go. Smear, smear, smear. No. Hmm. Mhm. Okay. You're gonna have to work out how to get the symmetry in this. Is that the right in the center or something? I don't know. It doesn't have to be like exactly perfect, like. Yeah, Blur 12 really doesn't feel like it does much. I don't know if that's looking alright or not. I don't know. Your nose rather. Oh crap! And crap with texture paint. I suck at texture paint. It might be alright for the lips though, now that I think about it. Oh, I'm a fucking okay. I'm an idiot. Okay, I can see that now. Oh, that is okay. That is bad. You know what? What? Okay. Since I'm here, I might as well. The fuck? You know what? While I'm here, I'm gonna fix this fucking one thing. Why did I even have that there, actually? Alright, there we go. Now we're just gonna just do this, do the UV select over, yeah, and X-ray it there. UV unwrap mineral stretch. Okay. Then here, rotate it around. That's like a head, can we make it smaller? That's the eye. Grab up here. Grab up here. Ah, you sons of bitches! Fucking god, fucking damn it! God, damn it! So click this again, and then I click this one, this one, this one, this one around, and this one. That's how did you select? Control Shift I, was it? No. Hold on. Select mirror first, then there. I had it before. Why stop telling me to use the fucking mirror thing again? Stop it with the fucking shit. Select symmetry first. I should know this by now. Something I. Oh, Control Shift M. Yes, it was Control Shift. I remembered. Haha, I remember. That's okay. Um, so happy I remember, because I mean it's slowly sinking in, even though it's fucking taking me. Just I'm gonna end this one again there, but I want to refix this island. You know what I mean? And I want to retexture that shadow part. So what? Zoom in, rotate. Seems we're straight. As I said, I suck at this. This can go way down actually, because I don't really need that one that much. That's my mark. Okay. Probably don't need that one too big either, but you know. Ears. And da. Save. And now we'll go to texture paint. Yes. Now we'll go to texture paint. And there you go, fill. I'm just gonna shift X this one and fill it all. Yes, getting there. Oh, what happened? What happened? Am I lagging? Yes, frozen. And now we can finally start getting going. So now I've got get this, go with this one. Okay, bring it up. And bring the color across here. Okay, with the color here. I want to get the bit, bit, bit darker, bit redder. I still would love to know why that's doing that. I was to grab this again, oh darn. I don't know if I'm doing this right or wrong. But it looks alright. Except for the darker part at the bottom. Does it? I don't know. Yeah, there's the head texture there too. The head texture's not on there. Uh, if I was to grab this now, and then what was it, TJ? You would a bit more. Turn the lines a wee bit there, and then what, you would get the blur, would you? And then try and soften it up. The fucking blur! The blur brush doesn't seem to. I need to get a tutorial on the blur brush. I understand what's supposed to do. It's supposed to like average it out so you, like the line fades, but I find it very hard to notice that it's actually doing anything. Only reason I know it's doing something is because my PC shows it way the fuck down every time I do it. Um, you can kind of see it there. Yeah, you can see the line almost a wee bit. I just need to blur it a bit more, but it's definitely adding to it. Just so little. I don't know if it's worth it, but it's definitely adding to it. Um. Okay, no progress because I don't really know where to go. Fuck it, I just need to watch more of the quantum videos or something. He's texturing or does those videos. I need to tune in. But anyway, I'm just gonna stop here. I want to do something at least. The videos are not getting as long as I hoped they were. I hoped I would get more, but it says I just feel like I'm lost again, and it just puts me off. Doesn't look as good. I finally solved that issue, or the principal PC. Just to double check, just go to shit again. Yes, it is in there. Yeah, you can make them look shiny. I want it, but no, I don't want to. Anyway, yep. To the next time.